Module 24, Collaborating with Others. In Module 24, we'll be creating a shared workbook, viewing and removing users, resolving conflicting changes, viewing the change history, comparing and merging workbooks, tracking changes to a workbook, accepting and rejecting changes, removing workbook sharing, some exercises and their solutions, and a final summary. So why collaborate with others? Well, sharing a workbook shares the work and multiple users can contribute. Multiple users can offer the opportunity to get the best range of results, but the workbook can also be open to errors. Controlling from who and where the data arises offers a greater level of control. So let's get started. We have another fictional spreadsheet, this one for Oil and Sundry 2012. The setup for this spreadsheet is that the spreadsheet is shared with other users who have to fill in the information. So for example, while we've created the spreadsheet, we have to send it to the different locations so they can fill out their information. For example, Jeweller's Hollow planted olives on March the 12th and harvested 8,745 bushels. They sent it then to the Olive Grove Limited to create olive oil on the 2nd of the 10th 2012 with a yield of 6,230 litres with this batch number and this price per unit. Sharing a workbook is a handy method of ensuring that all the data that needs to be contained within a workbook is spread to the right users who have the required information to fill it in. To share a workbook, we need only go up to the Review tab and select Share Workbook from the Changes section. The Share Workbook window opens, and right now we only have one user, Shore Academy, and they have exclusive use. If we tick the checkbox here, we can allow changes by more than one user at the same time. This also allows for workbook merging. We'll come back to workbook merging later on. If we tick this box, when we save this spreadsheet, it will now become a shared workbook, and whoever we send this to will also have the same opportunities to change and edit the workbook. If we click on the Advanced tab, we have 4 more options. We can track the changes made to the spreadsheet, or choose not to track any. We can update the changes whenever the file is saved, or when it's automatically saved by, in this case, 15 minutes, or however long we decide. We can also save our changes and see other changes, or just see other people's changes. The next section, which is quite important, is ask me which changes win, or the changes being saved win. If we have the control of the spreadsheet, in essence, if we're the ones who decide what changes take place, always keep this top option checked, ask me which changes win. And we also have 2 further options below, the print settings and the filter settings. It's always best to keep these on. If we're looking to see what changes take place within the spreadsheet, leave these 2 boxes checked. Once we're happy to share our workbook, click OK. This action will now save the workbook, and we click OK again. Our workbook is now saved as a shared workbook. Any other users who receive this workbook will also know that it's a shared workbook by the fact that the word shared is held in square brackets at the very top after the file name. It's important to remember, when we create a shared workbook, any changes we may have made in regards to protecting, hiding, or locking any cells will also be transferred across with the shared workbook. If we've locked or hidden any cells, these cells will not become available to other users without the password. So if you're considering sharing a workbook, it's a good idea to make sure that the protection settings are already very clearly defined. If protection is required for a shared workbook, we can select this up here in the Changes section of the Review tab. Selecting this will allow us to check this box, Sharing with Track Changes, which means that no other user with access to the shared workbook can remove the change history. One last point on sharing workbooks. Workbooks are shared effectively when stored in one central point. So for example, many users can access the same file from one location. A cloud storage system, a domain, a network or a server would be the ideal solution to this. Alternatively, if one shared workbook is distributed amongst many users, when those users send back the workbooks with the changes in effect, this is where we use merged workbooks, and we'll come to this later on. The Oil and Sundry shared workbook is currently stored in a public folder and 3 users have access to it: Shaw Academy, John Smith and Jane Smith. To see a list of any users currently using the open shared workbook, go to the Review tab in the ribbon and again select Share Workbook. In the Share Workbook window, a list of all currently active users is held below, and any one of which can be selected. If we wish to remove a user from the shared workbook, select the user from the list and select Remove User. Excel warns us that if the user is currently using the workbook or editing any changes within it, then this action will prevent the user from saving the workbook and the user's unsaved work will be lost. So always make sure that any user to be removed from the shared workbook has their work up to date and current. Once we're happy, click OK, and the user is removed from the list. As is likely to happen, if 2 or more users change the value of the same cell and attempt to save the workbook, the Resolve Conflicts window opens. The workbook can't be saved until the conflict is resolved. This window contains 2 or possibly more windows showing each change by each different user. For example, in this one, we've changed the value in cell D7 from 6,000 to 6,250, whereas John Smith changed the value from 6,500 to 6,750. Deciding on which value is correct is really down to you. However you mean to ascertain the correct value, once you've decided it, you can either accept your own change or accept the other one. Either way, the change is selected and the file can now be saved. Right now our shared workbook only has 3 active users, but let's imagine our workbook is much larger and is shared by over 100 users. Any changes taking place with that many users need some method of tracking that's more efficient than the one we're using so far. One method of keeping all our changes tracked is to go to the Review tab and select Track Changes. And from the Track Changes menu, select Highlight Changes. In the Highlight Changes box, we can see when, who and where any changes were made. Within each one of these options, we can check the box and also make a further selection. So right now we can see when, since I last saved, or all, not yet reviewed, or since, and then add a date. And we can do this for each one of the options. The best method of tracking all changes is to view the history. To do this, always make sure that List Changes on a new sheet is selected, and click OK. A new sheet opens called History, and can be seen down here. Excel will construct this sheet for you. There's an action number, a date, a time, a who, the change that was made, the change in which sheet, the range, the new value, the old value, the action type, and the losing action. Action type and losing action really specifies who won the conflicting change. You'll notice the history cannot be deleted. However, when we go to save our spreadsheet, the history sheet will be hidden again and disappears from view. To see the history sheet one more time, Again, go to Track Changes, Highlight Changes, and make sure List Changes is selected at the very bottom. Make sure to also uncheck any of the boxes on top when using the history sheet, as the boxes checked here will also be specified in the history. And our history returns one more time. Each value in the history also has sort and filter options, which makes it even easier to specify who made a change, what the change was, and where. To compare and merge workbooks, we first need to make the Merge option applicable. In the Review tab, there is no Merge button, so we need to add it to Excel. To do this, go to the Customize Quick Access toolbar, go to More Commands, and in the Choose Commands From box, change this to All Commands. Scroll down to Compare and Merge Workbooks, click Add, and then click OK. And the Compare and Merge Workbooks button appears. With our Merge and Compare button enabled, we can now merge and compare other shared workbooks into this one. It should be noted that the other workbooks must all be stored in the same location as the original shared workbook, but also have different names. To merge and compare the workbooks, click on the Merge and Compare button, then navigate to the location where they're stored. In this case, I've gone ahead and named them Oil and Sundry 1 and Oil and Sundry 2. The original Oil and Sundry file is the one presently opened here. Select the file, hold down Control, and select any other files you wish to merge. When we're done, click OK. It may have been too quick for you to notice there, but changes have already been made to the shared workbook. To see the changes, again we go to the Review tab in the ribbon, go to Track Changes, and Highlight Changes. Click OK, and all the new changes from the other shared workbooks are now revealed in our original workbook. We still have to go through the accept and reject process to maintain precision by going to Track Changes and again to accept or reject changes. To save time, we'll select Accept All. And now once again, our shared workbook maintains the precision from other shared workbooks. Any user with access to a shared workbook can also track the changes made by other users. It's very straightforward. If we go to the Review tab up in the ribbon and select Track Changes, then select Highlight Changes, the Highlight Changes window opens and we can specify the when, the who and the where the changes were made. We can also further narrow down our search with any one of the options held within each one of the when, the who and the where submenus. To see all the changes, deselect all the checkboxes and select OK. Each one of the changes made within the shared workbook will be highlighted with a coloured highlight around each cell. There's also a note attached to each track change. In cell D3, for example, John Smith changed cell D3 from 10,387 to 10,000. John Smith is also marked by this dark purple highlight around his cells. Shaw Academy is highlighted by dark blue, and Jane Smith is highlighted by light purple. Once we see track changes within a shared workbook, we can go back to track changes and accept or reject changes. We can also again specify the when, the who and the where the changes were made, and accept or reject each change based on this preface. Whenever a user makes any changes to a shared workbook, we need to either accept or reject any of these changes if we wish to maintain precision within the document. To do this, we go to the Review tab up in the ribbon, go to Track Changes, and select Accept Reject Changes. In the Select Changes to Accept or Reject window, we have three options: the when, the who, and the where. In the when section, we can choose to accept or reject changes that are either not yet reviewed or from a particular date. In the who section, we can select everyone, everyone but ourselves, or select a particular user. And lastly, in the where section, we can choose to accept or reject changes in the entire workbook or only from a specific range. And we have a range selector here on the right. Regardless of whatever options are chosen, once we click OK, the list of changes to track appears in the Accept or Reject Changes window. We can see how many changes have been made by this note at the very top. This first one is change 1 of 8 made to this document, and this change was made by John Smith on the 22nd at 12:13, and the change type is here. We can choose to either accept this change, reject it, accept all the changes made to the document, or reject all changes made to the document. Either way, if we accept or reject this change, in this case we'll accept, change 2 appears and tells us who the user was, when the change was made, and what the change was. And again, we can either choose to accept, reject, accept all, or reject all changes. We'll carry on accepting all the changes made to the document. Once all our changes are either accepted or rejected, if we go back to the Review tab, go back to Track Changes, and go back to Accept Reject Changes, regardless of whatever option we pick, once we click OK, there are no more changes to accept or reject. In other words, users with access to the shared workbook will once again have to edit it for us to accept or reject any new changes. As it stands, our workbook now has precision. We can also still see the history of any changes by going to Highlight Changes and selecting List Changes on a new sheet. Our history sheet shows us all the changes made by all the users and the dates that the changes were made. We can also see what changes were made in the New Value and Old Value section. Remember, to get rid of the history sheet, we have to save our workbook, and the history sheet is hidden one more time. So users have two methods of working with the shared workbook. They can either open up the shared workbook, add their information to it, and also accept or reject any changes, or alternatively, they can open up the shared workbook, make their changes, and then another user can come along and merge and compare all the workbooks. It may be desirable, however, later on to remove the sharing option. To do this, go to the Review tab up in the ribbon, go to Share Workbook, and uncheck the Allow Changes button. Once it's unchecked, click OK, and Excel will warn us that the action will remove the workbook from shared use. As well as this, the change history will be erased, and any other users who are editing this workbook will not be able to save their changes. Once we're sure that all the information has been collated and collected from all the users, we can click Yes and remove the workbook from shared use. The shared option is now gone from the file name at the very top, and our workbook is now only for our singular use. For the first exercise, make the Oil and Sundry exercises file a shared workbook. Then save this onto the desktop. Okay, so this is very straightforward. We go to the Review tab, go to Share Workbook, and check the Allow Changes by More Than One User checkbox. Then click OK. Make sure to save the file to the desktop. Before we begin the next exercise, save the Oil and Sundry exercises file again to the desktop, but with a slightly different file name. Using the shared workbook options requires other users, which can be a little complicated to complete these exercises. By saving another copy, we can use the merge and compare options to track changes and accept or reject changes. So we now have two Oil and Sundry exercises file. One is the original and one is with a slightly different file name. Go ahead and open up the Oil and Sundry exercises file with the slightly different file name and make some changes. Change the March 12 date in cell B3 to April. Change King's Court in cell C5 to King's Court Farm. And change the date in cell G3 to the 8th of the 10th, 2012. Once we're done, select Save. Once the changes are completed, save the file, close it, and reopen the original Oil and Sundry exercises file. So by now we should have two copies of the Oil and Sundry exercises shared workbook stored on the desktop. One, the original Oil and Sundry exercises workbook, and the other with a slightly different file name and with some edits added in. For the next exercise, in the original Oil and Sundry exercises workbook, make sure that the Merge and Compare button has been added to the Quick Access toolbar, and merge the other copy of the exercise file into this one. Remember, the original file can't be merged, only the copy. Okay, so to merge and compare the workbook, click the Merge and Compare button, access the location on the desktop where the other file is stored, and click OK. Now that we've merged the two workbooks together, we can see the changes that have been made within the original workbook. For the last exercise, accept the new changes, then remove the sharing option from the workbook. Okay, so to accept the changes, we go to the Review tab, go to Track Changes, and Accept Reject Changes. Uncheck all the options so we get access to all the changes, and click OK. We can either accept them all individually, or click Accept All to accept them all collectively. Once all the changes have been accepted, go back to the Share Workbook option and uncheck the Allow Changes box. Click OK, then click OK again. And the workbook is now removed from all shared directories. So in summary, sharing workbooks can allow multiple users to add, delete, or edit data simultaneously. A shared workbook saves a tremendous amount of time and increases efficiency between users. And while some conflicts can arise from shared workbooks, Excel uses an effective array of tools that are adept at resolving them. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next module.